Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk FM. I hope you're all well and keeping safe. I mean, it's a great pleasure today that I've got a former co-worker with us and a property expert in Duncan from Pure Gym. And today we'll be talking around the issues we've seen in the press regarding tenants and landlords. Morning, Duncan. How are you today?
Morning, Adam. Yeah, good, thank you. Yeah, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too. The fitness industry and leisure industry has probably been one of the worst hit due to COVID-19. How are PG keeping up the spirits and keeping connected with their teams?
Certainly 95% of our staff have been furloughed. All the gyms had to close on the 20th or overnight on 20th, 21st of March. So the bulk of our employees are employed in the gyms, so they have all been furloughed. The vast bulk of head office staff have been furloughed as well. So there's a core team of just over 100 people that have remained in the business. We each have regular updates with our teams, both furloughed and working members, to keep them up to date with what's going on in the business, and just try and make sure everyone's aware of what's happening in the business and the wider industry, really.
Yeah, I've seen some of the great videos online at the moment, especially sort of through LinkedIn and other channels, trying to keep everybody engaged within Pure Gym and also within fitness in general, because it's one of the key drivers, isn't it, for the lockdown, is people being able to get outside now to do their exercise.
Yeah, I think it's brought health and fitness and well-being to the forefront of people's minds, and for a lot of people, I think for the first time in a long time, they've actually got the time to do it now. And long may that continue. You know, when we all come out of lockdown, you know, maybe that could help the gym and the leisure industry, and that people will be making more time for health and fitness. So we might find it beneficial in the long run.
No, definitely. Let's hope so, because I think it's a really important thing. I mean, and that goes on to what we're talking about today. We've seen in the news some headlines which are sort of challenging, to say the least, when businesses have got no revenue coming in, and landlords still demanding tenants to pay the rent, and in some cases the service charges when the business is closed. You know, what are your views on this, and do you think this is as widespread as the news are making out, or is it really centered around those few landlords that are struggling themselves?
Look, I mean, nobody wants no revenue, whatever the reason. I mean, as you rightly said, we had to close all of our gyms and therefore froze all our members' direct debits overnight on the 20th to the 21st of March. In its simplest form, you might turn around and say, well, this isn't our fault. We want to trade. It's also not the landlord's fault, but given that we're getting zero revenue, why should the landlords get any revenue at all? You know, let's share the pain. So some landlords immediately responded in a positive way and totally understood the position. And we're in a fortunate position where financially they are able to support us through this very, very difficult time. Some landlords at the opposite end of the scale saw it as an opportunity to take the upper hand, and we've had a number of legal representations from landlords in the form of statutory demands and CRAs, commercial recovery of rent arrears notices, a couple of solicitors' letters. But most of the landlords, to be fair, have engaged in a conversation with us. A lot of them have asked us questions about what else we're doing across the wider business to mitigate cost, and obviously we answer those questions as best we can. Most of them are quite happy to have a conversation. That conversation doesn't always lead exactly where we'd like it to or where we'd need it to. But they're certainly in the main sympathetic to our position, as we are to theirs. We see our landlords as partners, not adversaries. And we want to come out of this in a position where we can continue to be a reliable and honourable tenant for the remainder of the lease term, and hopefully into a new lease, and pay rent for that period of time. You know, you look at a 10-year lease, you know, we're paying 120 monthly payments. We're asking them to waive 3 of those in a very, very difficult time. But you know, landlords have financial responsibilities. They have offices. They have staff that they need to pay. So we're all in the same boat through no fault of our own.
So I mean, just not to get into too much detail, obviously, but I mean, what percentage of your landlords do you think have come along and done the right thing versus the percentage that are not doing the right thing, regards to Purigen?
It's a reasonably small percentage who've responded to our initial communication asking for 3 months rent free exactly as we wanted it. Having said that, there's an increasing number of landlords that are quite happy to add some term to the lease or move a breakout by an equivalent time, and that seems to be quite a successful strategy. That, you know, if we get 3 months rent free and we've got a break in 4 or 5 years time, we'll add 3 months or 4 months onto that break date. Or if we've got an expiry in 8 or 9 years, maybe we'll add 6 months onto the term of the lease in return for 3 months rent free. There are some who, particularly some of the smaller, highly geared private property companies, who are absolutely reliant on our rent, and we're probably quite a big tenant for them. So they're reliant on our rent to service their debt. And some of those are feeding back to us that the banks aren't really playing ball with them in terms of deferring payments and waiving interest charges. So that's a little concerning, because there was a very clear directive from the government to banks that they were to work with their landlord and try and assist them to assist the tenants. Whether this is landlords hiding behind the banks as an excuse, or whether it's genuine, I don't know. I'm not obviously party to the discussions that landlords have with their banks. But there does need to be more government intervention, and we are mindful that every single representative body of both leisure and retail tenants is lobbying the government hard to get that government intervention. The Coronavirus Act as written, I think the government completely missed the point, and they assumed that forfeiture of leases was the biggest risk. But common sense tells you that the last thing a landlord wants at the moment is a lease back on premises that they've got little or no prospect of reletting. If they do, it's going to be at a lower rent. They're probably going to have a much bigger incentive package to let it. And during the interim period, they're going to be paying empty rates on it, because empty rates does not qualify for the government's rates mitigation scheme. So forfeiture it's a non-starter for anybody. We don't want to lose the leases. The landlords don't want the premises back. More important is the recovery remedies that are available to landlords and still remain available to landlords, which is statutory demands, winding up petitions, and CRAs.
So I mean, we'll move on to that, because one of the questions is around the Section 82, and I think we've just gone on to talk around some of the shortfalls, because it was supposed to be the remedy for this issue, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it doesn't seem to have gone far enough. And you've said that lots of people are lobbying the government at the moment. I assume that's to make some real simple changes that stop the landlord being able to take any action through this period, and as you say, start really engaging with their tenants and having great conversations about how they can both move through this period and come out of it successful. What changes are being lobbied at the moment, do you think?
Well, I mean, the first thing is there's a moratorium on forfeiture, and we both the leisure industry and the retail industry are lobbying hard to have that moratorium extended to recovery remedies as well, which clearly doesn't really suit some of the landlords. And also a moratorium, it's only a short term moratorium. It's only going to be 3 or maybe 6 months. So the issue that we have as a tenant is fine. We've effectively managed to pay no rent for this 3-month period or 6-month period. But at the end of the day, the landlord is still going to be in a position at some point at the end of this moratorium to serve another stat demand, or serve a winding up petition, or serve a CRA. So we're just pushing the problem forward. We're not actually dealing with it. But I think what a moratorium would do is to give the government time to come up with an overall solution that is equitable for landlords and tenants, and to some degree the bankers. And the obvious solution here is for the bankers to defer interest, add term to the loans, for the landlords to take the extra term on the loans and give the tenants rent free. Now, whether you do that from the top down and the government legislate for the banks, or whether you do that from the bottom up, and the other alternative is to do it from the bottom up and for the government to give money to the tenants to pay the rent, or a proportion of the rent. I think the first solution is stronger because it's far less of a drain on very limited government resource, whereas what they've done in some countries, governments in some countries have done, in that they're just meeting tenants' expenses. Ultimately that's got to be paid back. So really, I think the banks need to take some responsibility here. The last economic downturn, it was the banks that were bailed out by the taxpayer, and they were forced by the government to build up cash reserves for a similar situation. Well, today it's here, boys. Get your hand in your pocket and let's see what you're made of. And some banks don't seem to be doing that at the moment.
No, I mean we were talking around just the business loans. And also let's be perfectly honest, most of it's coming as grants. Very small amounts coming as grants, most of it's coming as loans, most of it's coming as a delay of a certain bill. And as you say, it's all going to catch up on people. You're kind of delaying the problem rather than fixing it here and now. I mean I suppose that comes on to one of the things that got me when I came into the fitness industry was how everyone talked to each other, how everybody worked together across businesses, as well as in their own companies. We Active UK being part of this. How have you joined together, or have you joined together and started a process with Active UK and landlords as a collective, or are you working separately still at the moment?
No, I mean we obviously a very active member of Active UK. Excuse the pun. So our chief exec Humphrey Cobbold is on the CEO panel there, and is very active. I'm on the property forum there for all the property directors and heads of property of the various gym companies. Active UK have been brilliant in the way they've brought all the gyms together, both public and private sector gyms, and they've lobbied very, very hard. They're very well connected in government, and they've also been liaising with the other property sector representative bodies, such as the British Retail Consortium, Accessible Retail, Revo, all these organisations. So there's quite a joined up approach across all the representative bodies, and particularly amongst the gyms through UK Active. They've got into government at a very, very high level, and we are extremely confident that things will be done. You can kind of understand why it perhaps wasn't the first priority for government. They had to deal with people's incomes, they had to deal with testing, they had to deal with NHS capacity, etc. They were the critical things to deal with first. Absolutely right. But now these things are now there's a plan in place for these key elements of dealing with COVID-19. Now is the time to look now at how they can support businesses and make sure that businesses come out of this going forward. And I mean landlord businesses and tenant businesses here, not just us. It's essential that we all come out of this to fight every day. But you can be instrumental.
Yeah, I saw in the news it was predicted that something like 2,800 gyms are going to close their doors and not reopen through the next few months. I mean, I assume that's kind of top of their list to try and make sure that these are protected across the board, and we lose as little number as possible.
Yeah, I mean, gyms are are very important to the fitness and well-being of the population, and that in turn relieves burden on the NHS, which we constantly hear is underfunded and over capacity, etc., etc., etc. So, you know, gyms are absolutely critical to that, and to lose 2,800 gyms, and you'd sort of think that a lot of these gyms that are lost, it's going to be businesses that weren't in great financial shape pre-COVID, much the same as we've seen with certain retail businesses and restaurant businesses. But also, it must be incredibly difficult for some of the franchise operators of these gyms. You know, the smaller guys that have got one or maybe two franchises, and they perhaps haven't got the cash reserves or the ability to raise money like the big boys have got. And not only that, they probably haven't got the revenues pre or post COVID to pay back additional debt. So you wonder what's going to happen to them, and you sympathise with these guys that have perhaps put their life savings into setting up their dream business, and suddenly this happens through no fault of theirs, and they were reasonably successful, but now suddenly the business is on its backside. And government have got to recognise that. You know, it's not just about a business. It's not just about one guy owning a gym. It's about his 800 members who are keeping fit and healthy, and not going to the doctors, not having to go to the doctors and the hospital because of it. So there's a bigger implication of it on this.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, I mean, we've seen a lot about it, sort of physical and mental well-being being a big issue in lockdown. Even with such a short period of time, people that you're allowed outside to do your exercise, a lot of people are utilising that time to go for walks with their children and do other bits, and not actually being able to get that escapism, I guess, that people sometimes use the gym for. You know, I mean, and let's be honest, when this period of lockdown is over, it's not an instant return back to normality. I guess you guys are in the midst of trying to sort of plan a reopening structure, and sort of how you're going to deal with social distancing, what impact this is going to have on your staff and your members, because until, if there is a vaccine that comes out and protects people, there is going to be a heightened risk. I mean, we've seen in the news, whether it's correct or not, that there's been a slight increase again in the figures in Germany. So you're not immediately safe the minute you come out of lockdown. But how are Pure Gym currently looking at what's going to be a mammoth reopening task, but also how to keep members safe?
We had to close down the gyms in a phased way. I don't know whether people are aware, but in January we completed the purchase of a business in Europe called Fitness World, which has got about 200 gyms across Denmark, Switzerland, and Poland. And they were all three were a little bit ahead of us on the curve in terms of lockdown and the like, because of COVID. So we learned a lot through those businesses about how governments were handling them, handling closing them down. And throughout the close down period, because it was overnight when they told us we could no longer trade, but the actual social distancing side of things and cleaning within gyms and making sure that staff were protected, that had been going on for a couple of weeks before we actually had to close down. So having the advantage of having these European businesses, we can see what other governments are doing and what we need to do in these countries before we reopen in the UK. I mean, the first thing, of course, is we need to make sure that the properties are safe. So it's all the Legionella testing and making sure that there's no infection in the gym, deep cleaning them all. We've got to make absolutely certain that all our Pure Gym colleagues, our employees, are safe, and that involves PPE, it involves hand sanitizers, it involves equipment and products available to clean machines and to clean the gyms, it involves regular cleaning of the gyms, and legislative, we don't know yet. And then we've got to make sure that our members are safe and not infecting each other with the virus. So when we closed down, there was, as you mentioned, there was social distancing. So we couldn't do classes. We had to close certain machines down so that people could maintain a sufficient distance between each other when they were exercising. There was antibacterial spray and blue tissues next to every machine, and staff were making sure that every machine was cleaned after use. And the response from members and colleagues was absolutely brilliant. So I've no doubt whatsoever that we can put together a perfectly acceptable reopening plan once the government gives us the nod that we can start to reopen the gyms. I mean, I think the important thing that landlords need to perhaps understand is, yeah, okay, we'll get a date when we can start to reopen the gyms, but it will be phased. And that may be that we can't offer full service, so we have to give members a choice possibly of when they actually rejoin up to the point of us being able to offer full service. It might be that we have to offer them some sort of discount on the membership. So whilst we managed to retain the bulk of our members with frozen memberships and didn't lose too many to cancellations, it's not just going to be a case of turn the tap on, we're on full revenue again. It is going to take time to build back up. And the last thing anyone wants is a second spike of infections and having to go into lockdown again.
Yeah, and yeah, I think that's the case for sort of a lot of businesses that are currently closed, isn't it? You're going to have to allow reduced numbers of people into your gyms, so that the members are still going to be affected. You're not going to be able to, as you say, just turn the tap on and open them all back up. It's going to be really phased and structured, and it's got to be tested and made sure it's safe. In some of this, as we've seen, there's going to be a bigger supply and demand gap. So as you say, you've got to get out and do your Legionella testing, probably do your safety tests within the gym. The engineers have got to be available to go and do those. A lot of those are furloughed at the moment. As you rightly say, just because you're open, the revenue's not going to be at the level that it's expected. So what does it happen with rent during that period? The landlord's just going to expect full rent straight away as soon as it opens, putting extra pressure, because it's not just Pure Gym, this is across the board. I mean, as I know, extremely successful. And I hope that, I know that they're going to survive this period and come out. But how worried are you about the long-term impact that this is going to have? I mean, Pure Gym had a great expansion plan going, really engaging with a number of landlords about pushing forward. They've been realistically been hailed as a protector of the high street as well in recent years, making space that was lying dormant because of the decline in retail. What's your sort of vision for the future? Not just looking at now. Is it going to slow things down, or is it? Do you think it's just a pause before you're re-going again?
Look, it's inevitably going to slow things down. The property landscape is going to look very, very different in the future when everything reopens. There's going to be tenants that aren't there. There's going to be an oversupply of property and a big slowdown in acquisition program for businesses that were acquiring pre-COVID. I think that's inevitable. You'll see that after any economic downturn, whatever the reason for it. I mean, look, we liquefied the business in cash terms as much as we possibly could when we knew COVID was coming. So we have a pot of cash. We're burning X million quid a week. We're trying to mitigate as much of that as we possibly can in the short term. And the more of that we can mitigate, the stronger position we're going to be in to carry on with an acquisition program when this is all over. We had a pipeline of 60 sites that we were going to open this year, and we were working on a pipeline to open 80 sites next year. Realistically, that's probably not going to happen now in those sort of numbers. And a lot of it is going to be pushed forward by at least a few months. My gut feel is that this has probably pushed our entire program by 12 months. We won't know until everything opens up again. But we're going to have to review the deals that we'd agreed but weren't legally committed on pre-COVID. And then we're going to have to see what happens and how pragmatic landlords are being with their expectations of rent and capital contributions and rent freeze on stuff that comes to the market, and we'll look at each deal on its merits. But I mean, Pure Gym was formed in a recession. That's when the business started.
Yeah.
Arguably, it's almost a recession-proof business, because whatever we lose out the bottom in terms of members from perhaps people who find themselves in an unfortunate and very different employment status to what they were pre-COVID, there's also a lot of people whose financial position has changed, who are perhaps members of gyms towards the top end of the market, who still go to a gym, but perhaps don't want to pay 60, 70, £100 a month to go to a gym. Yes. And to find a high quality, low cost alternative that will serve their purposes until their financial position changes again. We and several of our key competitors in the budget gym market meet those criteria. So I think that the business has, presuming this thing doesn't go on for too long, because there's a limit as to how long any business can survive in complete lockdown with no revenue. But we're kind of mindful that sort of June, maybe July time, we should be able to get some sort of opening again, and over the course of a month or two, that should get perhaps to full opening, as long as we don't have a second spike in infections. And if that's the case, then we'll have an acquisition program again. How many we'll do this year and next year, I really couldn't say yet. We don't know how much cash is going to be left in the pot.
Well, that's one of the things, isn't it? I mean, the landlords have got to be working with the tenants. They're going to protect them coming out of the other side of this, because we've seen obviously some very sad stories in the papers of businesses starting to go. The longer this goes on, the more businesses will fall by the wayside. Obviously, I personally would still believe that the low-cost gym operating model is going to be successful when we come out of the other side of this, or purely on the basis, exactly as you said, the funnel might come out at the bottom, but you'll have some more coming in through the top from the higher end gyms. So, I mean, for me, this gives more reason for the landlords and the government to come in and protect this sector. It was the fastest growing sector for taking property in the UK. It was bringing back covenants to landlords and some of the shopping centres and creating footfall. And this is why, I wanted to speak to you today, because getting underneath those headlines that we're seeing, where landlords were kind of consistently demanding rent payments, it sounds like you've been having some really good conversation. So I guess your day to day at the moment is really just engagement with landlords consistently.
Yeah, pretty much. And we have a number of landlords where we occupy multiple sites, and where we also have other acquisition deals ongoing. And I think, one thing here is it's got to be, we're all in the same boat, and we all need to support each other as much as we can. And that's all retail and leisure businesses and landlords. And I think, without a shadow of a doubt, we'll be more mindful to support landlords going forwards who we're looking at acquisitions with, who've supported us more strongly during this crisis. We've got landlords who, for example, didn't manage to finish landlord's works, and they're not going to finish them now before a long stop date. They're asking us to extend the long stop date. It would be immoral not to. So yes, of course we'll do that. But by the same token, where we just got an obligation to complete a lease with a landlord because they have finished their works and we're obliged to go on site. We expect the same from a landlord. We clearly can't go on site. We can't get materials. We can't get contractors. Can we have an extra rent-free period in the lease that will reflect that? So it's got to be a two-way thing here. But landlords that support us will get our support going forwards. Landlords who act brutally with us will not get our support going forward. And I just reiterate that the whole of the sector has got to work together on this. We're all in the same boat. It's no fault. The government only have so much money they can throw at it, and we've got to find solutions to the problem ourselves to some degree. We're all grown-ups, let's have a talk about it without some legal letter being fired out. We appreciate your position, you've got to appreciate ours, but let's just pick up the phone and have a conversation about it.
Yeah, and it's amazing how many people we've spoken to in different sectors that it is about having that grown-up conversation. It's just about working together. And we're hearing the centralized sort of headlines that they want to print. They're saying that nobody's working together, and actually when you get under the skin of it, there's a lot of people that are actually doing it, and that's great. And also some great advice for people that are probably going through the same thing for yourselves, where their landlords have served notices for a number of reasons. I mean, we were speaking to business the other day, they've been served some notices, so I think they've probably got some great advice off you there. So thank you so much for joining us today. I wish you guys all the luck at Purgent. I'm sure you'll come out of this and you carry on your journey. Next week, we're joined by Mark Whitaker, facilities consultant for Thompson FM and non-executive director of the IWFM. And we're just going to be talking around the impact in the FM market and what to expect in the short term. Very much in the lines of what Duncan's just said, that as they mobilise their gym, they're going to be requiring that sector to step in and do Legionnaire testing, fire alarm testing. There is going to be a issue with supply and demand, and we're looking to get underneath that next week with Mark, before we move on to our panel talk the week after, where we are going to have some real experts on here that are running service providers within the FM industry. So thanks again, Duncan. Thanks everyone for joining us, and take care and be safe.
Thank you.